Thank you for joining us for this episode. Today we're joined by Dr. Patricia Fulmer, and we're going to be speaking about cold start practice process and metrics on the OI Show. Well, thank you again for joining us for this episode. Today we're joined by Dr. Patricia Fulmer, and it is awesome to have you on the OI Show.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, we're super stoked that you accepted our invitation. Dr. Fulmer did some crazy things during a pandemic as she decided to, let's go start a practice cold. And that was just a spectacular thing to do. And I was hoping you could share with us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and those sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Patricia Fulmer, I'm out of Huntsville, Alabama, which is a fabulous place to practice. We have a huge variety of demographics here, so it makes the days fun. Lots of engineers, so we get all those patients we joked about in school that were the worst patients to have. That's pretty much every patient in my chair. But I decided to open a practice cold in the middle of the pandemic. When I decided it, I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, but you know what? You roll with it. So I opened in December of 20. So all the planning was in the middle of everything crazy, all of the construction, all of that stuff. And I've loved every minute. It's been fun. It's been challenging. We've gotten to build our own brand, which I think is, one of the most important parts of being in private practice and opening cold, is identifying that brand. And it's just something new every day. So we're rolling, and we're about a little over a year and a half now. So
in starting the practice from scratch, you have all these things that you think it's going to be like or that are going to happen. What is the thing that has surprised you that has been the best? Like, what was it that you knew it was going to be good, but this is something you didn't know was going to happen that you absolutely love about cold start practice?
Yeah, I think that feeling that you get when you get your first returning patient, the one that they didn't follow you, it's that, wow, they really want to be here, or that first referral from a patient that has told their friends or their family or saying, I love it here, I'm going to send my family. When you're an associate or when you're, maybe buying into a practice and it's kind of built up, you certainly have a lot of work to do, but when you start it completely from the ground floor, every single thing really is yours, and you're making those decisions. You're, trying to build that relationship and to know that it's working by people referring and coming back to you. It's a very humbling but really rewarding moment when that happens. So
yeah. So on the flip side, there was something you didn't know that you didn't know, and it was like, this sucks. What was the thing that has been like the absolute epitome of worst that you've encountered that you didn't anticipate?
Oh, goodness. Honestly, I think for me, it was, so in school, they do a good job, right? They introduced us to optical, but I had been in practices that either didn't have an optical because they were medical based, or did, but they were established enough that their opticians kind of knew everything, and we didn't really have that much of a hand in it. So when I became that first person that they came to when there was a insurance filing question or a lens issue or something like that, like, you really don't realize sometimes how much goes into all of that and how much you really need to know about the optics and the insurance background and all that. So that was a big challenge in the beginning, that learning curve, and just, staying nights and reading the VSP manual so you can figure out how to file something, or just doing some of the things that maybe you take for granted a little bit when you're in those more established practices. But it was a good learning curve, and it's certainly something that I, now can pride myself to say, no matter what happens with staff, if we were to have someone leave or someone knew we needed to train, then I had that ability, and I can run that on my own if I needed to.
Yeah. So I learned everything I possibly needed to know about practice management in optometry school. Said no one ever. Nobody's ever said that. So, going into a cold start, single, like all on your own, like, you had to embrace, you couldn't even rely on something that the staff was going to tell you, right? What what kind of metrics were you looking at? What kind of things were you kind of gauging as far as a profit and loss and being a business owner
Yeah.
outside of being an optometrist who sells glasses and contact lenses and does medical stuff?
Yeah, so I kind of love that question because my answer, if we had opened pre-pandemic, I think would have been completely different. But now, because all of these metrics, we've had years and decades of people opening practices cold. Like that necessarily isn't a new thing in our profession, but to do it now where trends aren't the same, where we have, busy months that used to be pretty much dead months, or months that used to be super busy that are not because people are at home more. That has been really, really interesting. And so for me, the biggest thing that I told myself when we opened was, yes, I'm going to talk to my mentors. Yes, I'm going to look at the trends that we had pre-pandemic to try to get some sense of what to expect. But as long as we are growing as a practice, and as long as I am seeing more patients and seeing, more of that revenue come in, and we're covering our bills and we're doing those sort of things, I'm going to call that a win, especially for that first year, because so much of it was unknown. Like I said, we opened in December of 20, which meant that all of 21 was the first year post or mid or whatever you want to call what we're doing now in the pandemic. And so patients, we didn't know what spending trends were going to look like. We didn't know if patients were going to be more frugal because of what they had gone through, or maybe they're excited to be back out in the world and spending, and they going to be buying 5 pairs of glasses because they can finally get out and wear some fashion. Like, who knew? And just taking it day by day and trying really hard not to, I don't know, criticize the business too much, but at the same time, figure out where we can be most profitable. Look at those invoices, say, okay, in this patient, this is how we maximize something, or this is how we didn't maximize something, more importantly. And going back and looking at that. And now that we're in our second year, I can go back and compare to ourselves and say, okay, are we growing? Are we, and we're in a interesting time now with a pending, possible recession. And that's been interesting to look at compared to last year. And so, just looking at those metrics. So we use Edge Pro as one of our metric, measures, which gives me a really great look at what we're doing in practice overall. We also just really make sure we're running reports. We're looking at all of our different trends and trying to maximize those. So if our demographic is asking for something, we're catering to that and making sure that we're putting it out there that we do those sort of different things.
What are some of the things that you're looking at as what you might consider your key metrics for you? They might be different for me, but what are the ones where you're like, hey, that's something I really am paying close attention to? One of them for me is I want to see if I have money going in the bank, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one to go off of. I look at one thing as a big picture, put money in the bank, is that, I'm looking at how many months, because right out of the gate in a cold start practice, you're not going to be profitable immediately, right? You're not going to have, most practices are probably not going to have $1 million, $2 million year the first year they open. And so I'm looking back and saying, okay, what months were profitable, which ones weren't? And that's the most black and white. Did we take in more than that went out? Beyond that, though, I look a lot at revenue per patient. How much are we doing a lot of $0 frames? Or are we doing a lot of insurance covered frames, patient owned? Or are we actually moving the products that we believe in practice? So that's one of the big ones. For us, we do aesthetics. So I track those. I see how many patients we had back for dry follow-ups versus how many, maybe you're doing these dry treatments. But I also look at, revenue per patient, new patient appointments is a big one for me. And then also looking at just overall exam numbers and that sort of thing, trends on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, a place to start, this is going to be baffling to you, but the vast majority of eye care providers who want to practice don't look at any metrics for their practice other than, I think I have more money in my bank account than I used to, and I can pay myself more money. But other than that, the vast majority of our eye care professional colleagues don't look at anything. And I think the one that may be most important to me is the same one as you, is revenue per encounter, or some people call it revenue per patient. And
Right.
I like to look at it as revenue per counter because it's your chair cost, right?
Right.
So, how is it going for each time somebody walks in the door on the
Mm-hmm.
schedule? Like, what is that going to mean? That kind of tells you, particularly in a cold start practice, if your revenue per encounter is, let's just say for easy numbers, 500, that would be great. But if it was that number, you could say, hey, if we have 20 appointments this week from a cold start, that might be a good place to start.
Right.
And then next year, if we get to 30 or 40, we can kind of gauge that. As long as that revenue per encounter stays
Right.
about the same, month to month, it's going to sway a little bit. But if you see that it's trending down, it starts asking this question: where are we not doing as well as we used to? Are we not doing as well in the optical? Are we not selling contact lenses? Is our aesthetics not being as effective? Are we not moving people towards it? But it gives you kind of that gauge of where to look at. And one of the other things that we kind of realized is, when our patient schedule got really busy, our revenue per encounter goes down. And that just means that we're not as effectively seeing our patients, right?
Right.
So, yeah, maybe I can do $500 an hour or revenue per encounter and see, 20 patients a week. But then when I get to 40 patients a week, it goes down to $400. And you run those numbers and you're like, hey, maybe it was better for us to see less patients and be more effective with them and care for them the way we want to. Now, certainly you
Yeah.
can see more than 20 patients or 30 patients a week, but just for the numbers, if that makes sense.
And in some cold starts, I mean, you certainly are going to have weeks like that, right? But I love that you mentioned kind of that inverse relationship between more and more money, not
Yeah.
necessarily, because I think a lot of people really do in their mind, they liken a successful schedule to a very packed schedule, and that's not
Yeah.
always the case. And I really truly believe in the work, smarter not harder mentality. We want to give the reason that I wanted to open a cold start was because I wanted to build a brand that really reflected caring for our community and our patients the way that I felt they should. And so for us, if we do that, that tends to elevate that revenue per patient because they feel cared about. They understand the brand. They understand why the lenses are what they are, or the frames, or whatever the case may be. And they know that what they're investing in is their true care and not just a pair of glasses. And so when we start to let that slip because we're getting busier, or, we hired somebody new and we didn't have time to really train them to the level that we probably would have, maybe the first day we opened because we had all the time in the world then, it shows in those numbers. And that's a really easy metric to look at, in my opinion, to see where your trends are headed. I definitely hang my hat on that one a lot because if you can keep that number up there and add more patients, then you're certainly going to be successful.
Yeah. So along that same line, and you just mentioned this, is in a cold start practice, you don't have to have every single thing figured out on day one because you're going to see how you encounter it the first week, which isn't very busy, and then you can fix it the next week, which is a little bit busier, and you can always be improving. But now you're a year in and processes are in place, but now you're encountering new people and new staffing and so forth and that. How important has it been to uh, to kind of document your process as time goes on, right? You learned VSP and you learned billing it, but if you just then went and verbally told a staff member, well, that staff member's leaves and now you have to go and redo everything, right? How important has process been and how have you implemented that?
Yeah, so it's almost like you were in my mind today because I was making a list of protocols that needed to be typed out today. I literally have it, 2 feet away from me. Because in that first initial part of a practice, you do you find your few staff that are going to work well and grow with you, and you can tell them, you've got time to tell them. You can meet, you can one-on-one train, you can do all these things. And so sometimes it's easy to forget that you're not always going to be those 2 staff members. You can hopefully be, 10 or 20 or however many. And for us, now we are right at that brink where you can kind of feel that momentum. You can feel us growing. And so it's super important to me to go and look at all of the things that we do, even the smallest things, the how to make an appointment things, the, the things that we do take for granted, how to do the auto refractor, those kind of topics that if have one staff that's pregnant, she's going to be out for a while. What is it that she does that I need to make sure everybody else knows how to do, even if I'm not available to ask? What kind of references? So for me, it's literally sitting back, thinking through our whole day and asking myself, if I wasn't in the office and somebody called in sick, what did they need to reference to know to get through the day and be able to practice? Or if something happened to me and another doctor needed to come in, what do they need to do? So for me, it's truly front to back. It's looking at how my tech works up patients, and not only how does she do it, but are there things that I would like to tweak with that? Because, are there things that maybe we've gotten a little comfortable doing that I want to back up and say, no, that's not our protocol. It's worked fine with just me and you, but now that we, hopefully are going to need more techs or more doctors down the line, will that work fine in a big picture? So making that in black and white and just saying, how do we work up? How do we do insurance? How do we, all of it, really?
Yeah. Yeah. It always reminds me of there's a movie called The Founder, and it's about Ray Kroc and when he came in and started working with the McDonald's brothers to make McDonald's what it is. And in this movie, it shows how the brothers completely demolished their system of making hamburgers and drew out on a tennis court the entirety of the kitchen and drew out where everything was. And then they orchestrated where every person was going so that the process of ordering a hamburger was quick, was like you ordered it and like 10 seconds later you had it, and how that whole process was built. And really, it wasn't their burger that made them stand apart. It was the process that made it was. And over the years, I think I've realized that, I can teach somebody, but if I don't have a process to teach people, then that process really is nothing, and it's broken. And if we're updating our process, if we don't write it down in the training manual, then what was the point of it? So it's this constant, one of our core values at our practice is faithfulness, which is honoring the process. And I'm so glad to hear that you're seeing the value of that, a year and a half in, and you've already built that, and you're seeing how, hey, if we're going to double in size within the next 2 years, which it would be easy for you to do, right? How will we operate then, right? And operate right now like you're too busy to deal with that stuff. And that's awesome that you're doing that already.
We're about to add our second exam room, right? Like I'm waiting on the shipping, which is taking a minute right now. That's okay. But we're adding our second exam room. And to even be able to think about that is amazing. It's a great place to be. But I'm already telling the staff, and I started telling the staff actually probably 3 to 4 months ago, look, we're getting a second room. We're not going to see the same number of patients we're seeing today in a day with one room with 2. So let's go ahead and start thinking about what do we need to polish? What do we need to tighten up? What do we need to get ready for when we add that? And know that, I know that those extra slots aren't going to be filled the day we add them to the schedule, but we need to be able to run it as if it is. And to me, the biggest thing is not only paying attention to those day-to-days, but thinking to where you're going so that you're always putting those protocols in place, building that brand for the future brand that you want to have and for the future success that you want to have. Because if you, there's a million fires a day to put out. And if you get caught up in those and don't think about everything else, then you're just going to stay where you're at. And so for me, it's all about that brand. I keep saying that word, but it's because I want to have a practice that, as proud of it as I am, and as much as I love it, doesn't have to have me necessarily here to be the same practice. I want to build something that's strong enough that we can plug in any doctor, any staff member, train them correctly, and let it flourish. And that way, not only can I have a life outside of here, but we can have multiple locations. We can grow. We can, be a pillar in the community, which is something that's super important to me, and be able to give back and do those other things. So it's all about that foundation, and now's the time to do it.
That's the E-Myth book talks about
Love
that,
them.
right? Building it, and
Yeah.
such a key thing. Very cool. Well, I'm really excited. You know, I've known you before you had this
Yeah.
practice, and then we didn't get to see each other as you were opening, but I've heard, you know, with being at meetings with you as it's going on, and I know you're crushing it, and I know you're
Well,
going to
thank
continue to crush it. And it's just awesome. I'm
I
super
appreciate that.
excited for you. Yeah,
I appreciate
yeah.
that. There's certainly days that you're like, was
Oh
that
yeah.
crazy? The vast
Yes,
majority
you
of it,
have to be.
like, we got this, you know?
Sane people don't do what we do, right? It's
No, that's fair.
you have to have a level of craziness.
It's really
Awesome.
been
Well,
crazy.
thank you for sharing your experience with us. And it's
Yeah.
awesome to have you on the OI show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. All the things you do for the show and for our profession. And it's just,
Yeah,
great to see you and hopefully see you in person soon. But um,
absolutely.
glad we're at least back to somewhat normal.
That's right. That's right. And thank you for joining us for this episode. Stay tuned for future OI shows, and make sure to like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time.